I'm going to get started here. I know that today the job market is really, really tough, and we're all trying to get jobs, find meaningful work, find work that is well paying. And I think that if we think about business analysis, the skills that we bring as BAs, we can actually apply this to our job hunting efforts. And we know that business analysis helps us solve problems. So let's try and solve the problem of getting through the business analysis job interview. I'm going to be covering quite a lot of material here. It looks like a lot, but I think you're going to start to see how all of these topics fit together. So we'll be talking about why interviews are hard or intimidating. We'll talk about how we can use business analysis to get the job. And I want to set a bit of context or the scenario about the tips that I'm going to be providing today. We'll talk about how you're going to use business analysis before, during, and after the job interview. And we'll have a discussion on whether or not business analysis is going to help job hunting easier for you. So with that, I'm just going to jump right in because I know that you're all eager to hear the material. We know that interviews can be intimidating or difficult. Does anyone have any thoughts on why interviews are so tough? You're competing against maybe 100 other candidates. Why do people get stuck at the interview if they even get an interview? Are there any thoughts in the chat? So Olamide, please let me know.
Yeah, so there is someone saying thinking on your feet. Chichi said thinking on your feet.
Okay.
That's why interview
Yeah.
for BA job is so hard. And okay, Oluwafumilaya says they want the best for the job.
Yes, these are two really good reasons why sitting an interview can be tough. We have to be able to think on our feet. We have to be able to answer impromptu questions. Sometimes our mind is racing, trying to find the right answer, and then we either get tongue-tied or we say something we didn't mean to say, or we forgot to mention a detail that we really wanted to include. It can be really intimidating that way. And of course, we know that the interviewer, the employer, is looking for the best candidates. How do they find the best candidates amongst 100 other people competing with you? So they might be going through a script of interview questions, and it can be really intimidating for the person applying for the job. And in your mind, you're probably feeling a lot of pressure because you're competing with all these other people who may or may not have the same skills that you have. So that's why you know your material, but you also have to be prepared to speak and answer the questions and ask good questions. And it's a lot of work to do for a candidate. Let's talk about why business analysis can help us. We know that business analysis is it's the process of trying to look at the overall situation and try and solve problems. So let's try and figure this out here. How can business analysis help you get the job? So I'm assuming that if you're applying for a business analysis job, you know how to do business analysis. You know how to analyze problems. You know how to find answers to questions, like connecting the dots. So why not use business analysis to get the job? We know that when we're practicing business analysis, we're not just taking a shotgun approach and seeing what kind of solution will stick. We often try to work on a methodical approach to fixing problems. We try to understand the big picture. We try to understand the pain points and then try to find solutions to those requirements, right? We go through it in a methodical approach. And I'm sure that you can do this if you're applying business analysis to prepare for the job. And if you do this, this is another tip. If you are applying business analysis to prepare for the interview and to understand what the organization is looking for, what the employer is looking for, it shows that you've done your homework. It shows that you've figured out how to do gap analysis. You have figured out how to come with solutions that satisfy the requirements. So before I jump into some actual ways of doing this, I want to just provide the context for what we're going to be talking about today, the scenario. So let's say that you got past the application process and they are inviting you to an interview. I don't necessarily have a whole lot of quick tips for applying for the job. I know you have to have your skills and your knowledge, but let's say for the purpose of this discussion today, you have booked an interview. This could either be a salaried job or a contract job, part-time job or a full-time job, really any kind of job that you are interviewing for. You can use business analysis to prepare for the interview, to participate in an engaged fashion during the interview, and afterwards to do some retrospective or lessons learned about how the interview went. And you should start seeing how this is familiar to business analysis. We always do things like preparation, execution, and lessons learned. What we also want to talk about here is the information that you bring about yourself and about the organization. This information is my key. Like my tip is to work on the information you need about yourself and about the organization and how they fit together. Let's jump right into this then. So what do you do before the interview? I think you need to do a lot of planning. You don't go into the interview unprepared, and that's why you might get tongue-tied, might not have the answers to the questions. So one thing you can do for yourself is to SWOT yourself. If you are familiar with project management or business analysis, you will be familiar with the term SWOT, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you sit down by yourself, you don't have to show anyone your thoughts here. Write it down on paper. Write down what you think your key strengths are. What are your weaknesses that you may be working on? What are the opportunities that you can use those strengths to react to? What are some threats out there? And I don't think that going for a job interview is necessarily a threat, but what are some things that you need to be aware of, some possible pitfalls you might fall into during the job interview? And how will you react to those possible risks based on your knowledge of your strengths and weaknesses? Also, what really helps for me is to envision getting the job. Envision that you got the job and you're performing it. And when you put yourself in that mindset, it's going to help you talk to what you bring to the table as a business analyst. Also, be free to talk about what you're passionate about. When you start writing down what are your passions, then you're going to bring some energy to the interview. So these are some good things to think about as you're preparing for the interview. Are there any questions so far or comments in the chat?
Oh no, there is none. It's only the comments. There are 2 comments from the first question you asked from
Okay.
Mark and Dozie, but there is no question yet.
Okay, thanks. Now I know I have these bullet points here. They sound pretty simple or trivial. I'm not saying, do all these things like a checklist. I'm doing this because it's important to know yourself before you walk into the interview, because you're there to market yourself. You're there to show how you may be different from other candidates. And there's no better way to do this than to have some self-awareness. And, write it down on paper, like literally pen and paper. You don't have to show your notes to anybody in the world, but writing it down helps you clarify your thoughts. It helps you take an inventory of your strengths and weaknesses and how you would apply your strengths or counter your weaknesses in a given job situation. It's going to help you market yourself because like what your profile is. I know you could look at your resume and you could memorize your resume, but I think that you could go a little deeper and do some deeper self-awareness. When you envision yourself in the job, for instance, envision how you're going to practice business analysis if you're actually there. And what passion can you bring? So, take some time to do this. I know that it takes a lot of energy, especially if you're actively looking for work and you're sending out hundreds of resumes and you are getting a handful of interviews. But I think that if you invest time to do this, just like if we invest time in doing business analysis, it will really pay off. So this is about yourself. And I want to talk about something else. What about the organization? I find that sometimes people aren't necessarily, they don't necessarily have a deep knowledge of the organization and what they're trying to accomplish. They are going into an interview, reacting to the actual job description. I suggest that you could actually go even a little deeper. You could look at the organization's strategy. So, for example, what are the organization objectives? Is this organization trying to enter a new market, for example? Is this organization reacting to some economic or political pressures? What is their mission and vision? So if you can understand their mission and vision and what their organization objectives are, you can start to talk their language, use the same vocabulary they use. And I think that's going to help the interviewers because it will be less mental work for them to understand the message you're trying to communicate. Also, understand the team objectives. When you look at the job description, it tells you briefly, what the project is about, what skills you need to have to be able to apply for the job. At the end of the day, I always look at these job descriptions and try to understand what are they trying to achieve by hiring a BA? What are they trying to achieve by doing this project? Why does this project exist? And you can tie that back to their mission and vision. So when you understand this, it's going to help you talk in their context. Do you know another tip I have? Whenever you can, get your hands on their annual report. All the publicly traded companies and government organizations, they are supposed to publish their annual reports or their strategic plans in a public sense. So try to get your hands on the annual report and some of these other plans that they have on the web. Look at what they're saying in these reports. And when you look at the way that they communicate, look at the wording. Annual reports, they often talk about the profits and losses and costs and their mission over the next 3 to 5 years, their goals. Start to understand what they're trying to achieve as an organization. It also helps you understand what is the context for this particular project that you're going to be working on. Why does that hiring team exist? So the team that you're joining, why do they exist? Are they going to be doing something that is going to help them accomplish something that was said in the annual report? And this is going to help you gain an understanding. When you get to the actual interview, when you start having discussions with them, you're going to be able to start connecting the dots, which is also what we do with gap analysis, right? When we understand the purpose of this job opening, it's going to help us understand what gap are they trying to fill? What solution are we trying to bring to the table by understanding where they are, where they need to be, and what needs to be done? So for example, let's say it's a job description to work on a team that is trying to automate 15 different reports. So let's say they have been working on these reports. There's 15 different reports, and they're all very manual. And they collect the data and they key it into Excel. They take that Excel spreadsheet, they copy it somewhere else. That other person massages the data again, and it's just inefficient. That's an example of a reason why they would put out a job description. They want a BA to come in and help them understand what are all these information requirements they have. How are they going to automate these reports to make the work easier? So just imagine yourself actually in the job and what questions you would ask. And that's part of the gap analysis. Are there any questions so far or comments?
Yes, there is a comment and a question from Chichi Ugelu. She's saying that while you were talking about SWOT yourself, like a self-awareness and understanding our strength, our weakness, our opportunities and threats, she said weaknesses are tricky, almost like shooting yourself on the foot. What would be your recommendation when discussing weaknesses?
So does a weakness have to be a weakness forever? Let's say you have a weakness in public speaking and you realize that, and is that weakness crucial to this job? Do you think they're going to ask you about it? Well, if they don't ask you about it, and if it's not even relevant to the job, don't necessarily worry about it. But I would think that a weakness doesn't have to be a weakness forever. If you acknowledge you have a weakness and they ask you about it, start talking about what you're doing to overcome that weakness. Are you taking public speaking courses? Are you practicing? So, if they ask you about a weakness, you can say, yes, I have a weakness in X. And these are the things that I'm working on. I'm really enjoying the learning process in working on this weakness because I have a vision that I'm going to be at a certain level within a certain time. So a weakness doesn't have to be like a zero. It doesn't have to be a game ender. Um, it, it's something, I think that if you can be honest and acknowledge that you have a weakness, but you are actively working to overcome it, I think that will make a big difference. Let's say another example. Let's say you have a weakness where you don't necessarily understand a particular technology, and you think it might be useful to understand this technology for the job. What you could say is something like, I realize that I may not be 100% proficient in this area, but I'm taking courses offline. I am working on practicing my skills with this volunteer job. So if you can show that you're actively trying to address that weakness, I think that it shows initiative and it shows that you are owning your own issues. So I think that also you're not going to lie about a weakness. You can't say I am an ace in this particular area. I'm the professional when you're not. So don't lie about your weakness, but you can admit that you are maybe not 100% capable in a particular area, but you're working on it. And you could talk about how, maybe you could also talk about how you realized you had this weakness because you became aware when you're trying to practice it in another job. So demonstrating that you have the self-awareness and demonstrating that you're actively working on overcoming the weakness, I think can really help. I hope that answers the question. Are there any follow-on questions or other questions?
Okay, I think Chichi is satisfied because I can see her make thumbs up.
Okay, all right. Yeah. This is great discussion.
Yeah.
Not all of this is perfect. I'm not perfect. None of you are perfect, right? So that's why we're here to keep learning. And if you can just show that energy that you're always learning, it really makes a difference. I want to come back to the organization aspect. Understanding the organization's mission and vision. Start thinking about what are some of the unanswered questions. So, just because they didn't state an answer in their annual report or the job description doesn't mean that it's an irrelevant question. As BAs, we like to see the details and the big picture. And we want to make sure that we have a complete or close to complete understanding so that we can do well in the job. So if you can think about how does this project relate to the overall company mission, and I did mention this earlier, it can really help because that way you can help sell your business analysis skills. We're not just working on a project just for the sake of working on a project. We're working on a project to help the company succeed. And what does success mean to them? Does success mean more efficiency? Does it mean more clients? Does it mean more revenue? Is there maybe some social aspect to their success criteria? So if you can understand their success criteria through their annual report, or through their job description, then you can talk about how what you bring to the table is going to help them be successful. So I think this is a heavy slide, but start connecting the dots. That's what we're pros at doing as business analysts. We connect the dots. So, Mr. or Mrs. Employer, you said this. The job description says this. I understand how these fit together. And I really hope that being part of the team will help advance the company and help them be able to achieve success. Those kinds of words. So if you can talk about how things connect to each other so that the company can move forward. And the company will be able to do so because you know yourself and you can market yourself and you can talk about how you are there to bring to the table the skills and knowledge to help them advance. So this is a lot. This session will be recorded, so I think you can also reflect on this material too. But again, it doesn't hurt to SWOT yourself, even if you're not applying for a job. Gain that self-awareness so that you know what your strengths are and you can play to them. You know what your weaknesses are and you can work on them. So let's say, yay, you secured an interview and you're ready to sit down and meet with the potential employer. So they're going to ask you things about yourself. Well, they'll probably give some kind of preamble about what the job is about and what their company does. Listen attentively and start seeing how what they're saying aligns with what you bring to the table. So during the interview, here are some tips I have for you that you can exercise. Given that you did your preparation, this part will become easier. So one thing that you might want to do if they ask you a situational question. So for example, can you describe a situation in your past employment where you had to work with many different cross-functional teams in the organization to accomplish a single goal? So I don't know if you're all familiar with the STAR method. The STAR method stands for situation, task, activities, and results. So you don't necessarily have to say, I'm going to tell you about the STAR method. But in your mind, you can start looking at your resume and thinking about how you could explain the situation you encountered. What was the problem that you needed to solve, situation, the tasks that needed to be performed. So we had to do some software implementation. We had to do some change management. We had to do some communications and promotion. So those are some tasks. What are the activities you performed? I worked on requirements for that software solution. I performed system testing on that solution. So for example, so you're tying it all together and breaking it down and telling the story. The result is by doing those activities, what results were achieved? You were able to accomplish the project on time, on budget, and on spec. You were able to help them reduce the defect rate of a software. You were able to help them communicate to the whole employee base who didn't understand what was going on. So those are some examples of how to explain what you did in the STAR method. What was the situation? What were the tasks to be done? What were the activities you performed? And what were the results? So it tells a story. And I think that is an effective way to explain when they ask you a scenario-based question or a situation-based question, because it ties all the details together and gives them a conclusion at the end. The second bullet, ask the unanswered questions. Do you remember how I said when you're doing your preparation, jot down some questions that you have? And I'm not talking about what is the salary range and what are the benefits. I'm talking about things like what goals is this team trying to achieve? How do those goals align to the company's mission and vision? what is it like to be a business analyst on this project? Who will it be working with? So start asking these unanswered questions that were not provided in the annual report or in the job description. I also think that it's useful to take notes. Whether you do it on your keyboard or on a piece of paper, take notes. If you're doing a remote interview, you may want to reassure the person you're not using an AI tool to answer the questions. You're simply taking notes. They might ask you. So just be aware that that's become a thing now, that people are starting to use AI tools to help them with the interview. I would say, no, don't do that. Listen attentively and take your own notes, and treat it like a conversation with the interviewer. It's not just a question and answer situation. It is, tell me about your organization and how I can help. And you're having that conversation. The other thing that I have, another tip is, how has your experience achieved goals? So this is a little bit like the STAR method where we talk about the results. But we could also talk about how your experience, not necessarily in a particular situation, but you could talk about, all the kinds of strengths that you have and how that helps the organizations go from their as is to their to be. Talk about your accomplishments. Remember I said SWOT yourself. Write down things that you're proud of that you achieved, because that's going to give you a positive mindset to be able to sell yourself in the interview. You will, I hope you will be asked how you applied BA techniques. If you are a business analyst applying for a business analyst job, I hope that you'll be able to explain how you applied, if you're using the bad box, amongst the 50 techniques, how have you applied them? It's one thing just to say that you followed the direction of the project manager, but if you can talk about your understanding of the BA techniques, then that will demonstrate that you can actually apply them on the spot. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
None for now.
Okay. Yeah, I just heard a chime. That's okay. Okay. The next bullet, maybe similar to talking about weaknesses. I also think that maybe it's helpful to talk about failures. If you haven't tried, then you're not going to fail, right? Or, how do you know you're going to fail unless you try? But I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing that you failed, because what you can do is talk about your lessons learned on that failure. I've had failures where, for example, the whole project got canceled because we were going way over budget. Or the whole thing got canceled because maybe the sponsor didn't really understand what we were trying to do. It's okay to have failures, because now you have that knowledge. And what you could do is, if I could do it again, this is how I would do it, right? You're applying lesson learned. If I was in this situation again, this is what I would do differently. So this is something that you can think about. Look at your resume and think about areas where you might have failed. And you're a smarter person now, I hope, or a wiser and older person. Write down how you would do that project differently if you were to do it again today. Because you're not hiding the truth from the interviewer, but you are showing that you're applying some lessons learned. And all of this should link to the company's success criteria. So you read the annual report, you read the job description, you gleaned from those details what their success criteria are. Are they trying to be more efficient? Are they trying to reduce costs? Are they trying to increase customer satisfaction? These are some kinds of success criteria. And having all these discussions in the interview, you can link up all your past experiences with their success criteria. If there are any questions, please chime in. I'm going to keep going about the organization. So do you remember when I talked about the preparation? I said, know yourself, gain some self-awareness, and then gain some awareness about the organization in the preparation phase. during the interview, we can start applying some of that preparation about the organization as well. So, one of the things that I like to ask is, what does business analysis look like in your organization? So if I'm applying for a BA job, I'm going to ask them, how does that look like? How is it conducted? Can you describe a project where business analysis has helped that project? Or if not, let's say they have no BAs and they're floundering. What you could ask is, how do you guys conduct projects? How do you ensure that projects are successful? How do you understand the requirements of a given project? So you can start picking away at this. And I'm not doing this, and I wouldn't necessarily do this just to get the job. It's more like help the interviewer think about the appropriate candidate they're going to look for. When you talk about business analysis, people are confused about what it is, and they don't really have a clear understanding. When you start picking away at this and you can try and explain the value of business analysis, then that shows that you really care about the profession and that you care about using business analysis to help the organization. You can talk about BA growth opportunities. So if you're going for a full-time job, like a permanent job, you can ask about, how do BAs grow in this profession? What kind of mentoring opportunities are there? What is their view on training for the business analyst? So when you ask about these growth opportunities, maybe that's also an opportunity for you to contribute. Maybe you could do some lunch and learns and some webinars in the organization. You can talk about some successes and failures that they've had with business analysts. This could be a little touchy. Maybe you can word it more diplomatically, but I would, what you could talk about is, what is your understanding of business analysis? How has that worked for you on a given project? What are some gaps that past business analysis efforts still had? Because I want to be able to make sure that we are successful, and I want to be able to fill those gaps. You can ask about, how do they do requirements analysis and management? Because we all know that the requirements are the building blocks for the solutions. So how do they organize all that information? And you're not doing that to quiz them, and they're not necessarily there to give you like the right answer or the wrong answer. You don't have to like their answer, but it's for you to understand how they do requirements management. And it could also be something that helps you decide if you're going to take the job. If they're very disorganized, or if they don't see the value in working on requirements, maybe it's not the proper job for you. So you also have the right to ask for this information, because you're looking for the best fit. You're not necessarily looking to just be the one who gets hired, right? So you want to see if you're going to do well in that job as well. You can ask them to describe how projects are run in their organization. Do they have project management office? Do they have steering committees? Do they have do they have to work with external challenges? For example, are they working with regulatory organizations? Are there certain government laws and regulations that they have to comply with that can make the project challenging? These are just interesting pieces of information to learn during an interview. We all know that people love to talk about themselves, right? So if you ask them, how is it working in your organization? How does their organization work with other partner organizations or external organizations? They will talk about that, and they'll give you a picture of, what is their landscape, how challenging it can be to work on a project. But it can also be something very interesting for you to work on. It's not just the same old operational boring job necessarily. How does this organization interact with others? And how will your small part fit in with that whole solution? Are there any questions? Okay, I'm going to keep moving on. We are at
Johnson.
one.
None for me.
Okay. Let's come back to let's get across that finish line.
There's someone with, oh yeah.
Okay.
You can go ahead. You raised your hand. Someone raised his hand.
Okay, I'm gonna keep.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Azuka.
Okay. Yeah, good evening, everyone. So from my time. So I just have a question to ask. So for me, I'm currently in Nigeria and I'm looking out for remote business analyst jobs. So you spoke about being able to evaluate yourself
Mhm.
to know the kind of company you're going to work for. So for me, I'm having troubles knowing how to, let's say if I were to give an elevator pitch, I
Mhm.
don't know how to properly articulate my skills in terms of strengths and weaknesses. I know there are a couple of things I can do, but
Mhm.
I actually don't know how to do that in terms of selling myself. So that's something
Okay.
I'm currently struggling with.
Yeah, I
And
think it. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
also, two, okay, then secondly, for business analysts, because of my last job or my current job now, I've realized that there are so many sectors, industries, and roles. Sometimes they are not business analysts directly, but some of the roles that you take up and responsibilities are that of a business analyst. So I also want to know how, after being able to articulate myself clearly, how can I say, okay, these are the parts which I can work on. These are the parts or these are the roles which are the best fits for me. So when it gets to an interview point, I'm not really struggling with myself that I think I can or I think I can't. But from the ad, I can quickly tell myself this is something I can go for and present well at an interview.
Okay. I would say to do a SWOT, swatting yourself. You know, the hard part is you have to be honest with yourself, but it's okay. You can just write it down on paper and not show anybody that information. But again, like, talk about your strengths. Um, what do you enjoy doing because you're good at it, right? Are you analytical? Do you understand technology? These are the things that you can write down. A little bit of a hint: if you are an IIBA member, you can have access to what they call the business analysis competency model. And it's a set of tools and some questions that you can use to assess yourself. And what IIBA has done, if you go to iiba.org and you have a membership, they have this questionnaire to help you assess yourself. But the questionnaire is focused on business analysis competencies. They talk about analytical skills, technology skills, um, personal productivity skills, things like that, like time management. Um, so they sort of home in on where you are, and you can always assess yourself that way. But again, look at your resume and think about, highlight the things in there that you're proud of, that because you accomplished them. So those are your strengths. And your weaknesses, um, I would say match up compare your resume with a job description that you don't think you're qualified for. What are those qualifications that are missing in your background, your experience? Let's say it's a qualification about enterprise architecture or something like that, or ERP technology. So if you realize you have that gap, that could be your weakness, and you can find ways to overcome those weaknesses. So look at IIBA's competency model, but also just pull out a piece of paper and look at and compare it with your resume. What are the things you're good at? And I'm sure you can write those down. For example, you being here shows that you are committed to learning. It shows, I'm hoping that all of you are working at or are good at time management, because I'm taking part of your weekend away. So those are the kinds of things that you can look at. Just look at your overall life and what are you good at, and what are the things that you think you want to keep working on. So that's going to help you with your SWOT analysis. The other question was about how diverse business analysis is, or how there's some job roles that touch on business analysis. And that is true. The job title may not be business analyst, but you would be applying business analysis skills. If you're just starting out and you don't have a particular specialty, I would suggest is become a generalist. Learn a little bit about many different industries, and then learn deep about one particular industry once you start getting some experience in that industry. So that's what they call the T model. Become a T model BA. So have a diverse set of knowledge at a general level. And then in one of those particular domains, let's say it's finance, get a deep knowledge. That's the vertical of the T. Does that help?
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm just scratching the surface here, but I think we can all collectively learn from each other. Let's get us past that finish line here. So based on this whole talk, think about what insights did you gain? Did I help you organize your thoughts in a way that you hadn't done before? And if everyone wants to answer these questions in the chat, that would be lovely too. And I think that might help Pollard as well, working on some of their programming as well. This could help you. For the organization, before you finish the interview, tell them that you wish them well, that they have the best fit candidate, whether or not it's them or you. Be graceful and tell them that, you hope that they find the best candidate to help them succeed and achieve their mission and vision. Thank them for their time and insights, because they have a whole stack of resumes they have to go through, and they took, half hour to an hour to interview with you and share some things about their company. You can talk about things like, I really admire what your company is trying to do. I really hope that you're able to find the best BA to accomplish those goals. So I just want to summarize with some final tips here. And I want you to believe in yourself. I know it's a very competitive market, but think about this interview thing as a project, and you can do it. You can apply business analysis. So speak from the heart so that you don't have to memorize things. You know yourself, so you can speak from the heart. It's okay to bring notes. We know that as BAs, when we're on the job, we have to take notes as well, right? What are you passionate about, and how are you pursuing your passions? Keep it safe for work. Keep it clean, but talk about some things that energize you to be productive in your day. Weaknesses are okay to talk about, and what are you trying to improve? This is similar to that failure thing. If you have failed in the past, how would you do that project again now, knowing what you have done? So, you're always looking to move forward. And treat this whole preparation, execution, and closeout as a BA initiative. Prepare, execute, and close out, just like a good BA. All right, so I didn't really have anything here, but if you have any thoughts about how business analysis can make the job of job hunting easier for you, please chime in. And again, the floor is open for any questions and answers. And you can always reach me on LinkedIn. I'll hand the floor back to Pollard.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Emily, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. Please feel free to indicate, put up your virtual hand if you have a question for Emily. And you can drop in the chat if you feel you are shy, you don't want to talk, you can put it in the chat. So while you are trying to do that, I quickly have short announcement here. So for Emily is part of our faculty for our business analysis career development program. The program is designed for anyone that is trying to transition into a business analysis career and they have prior experiences from other careers. They're not starting from the scratch. So what we do is to help you first translate, understand the business analysis you've done in your prior experiences and help you build a new BA resume. We also have our program is about, I'll call it 10 weeks long effectively, but there are add-ons where we have designed a curriculum for anyone that is trying to start a BA career, and it's very practical, very, very practical. So it's a combination of knowledge and experiential based learning where you learn, we teach you the theory, and then you get to apply it side by side. Myself, Emily, and Dio, we are on the faculty of the team, and we've been able to help other people, other BAs achieve success, land start BA role from junior BA roles even to senior BA roles. So it's what we do is total package from helping you translate your BA resume, interview preparation, the course itself, helping you optimize your LinkedIn. And something new we're introducing is more like a post-training fellowship, which I'm going to talk about more. Recently, we are also, we've not been doing this, but we hope to do this more often, master classes. But before I move on to the master classes, if you're interested in joining the career development program, maybe you've been thinking of how to start business analysis as a career, but you don't know how. We're starting a new cohort September 13th, and classes are Saturdays and Mondays. Saturdays, 12 noon EST, by the time we started this webinar, and on Mondays, 8 p.m. EST. Olamide, you can please share the link. So please take a look at the program information. You can find more information on the link. You can download the syllabus from our website, and you can also reach out, send an email. We'll have a web chat there to ask any questions you may have. We have more webinars coming up, so look out for our next webinar. We should have one before the end of the month. It might be myself or Dio, maybe something around interviewing or helping. But yeah, we've not concluded on the topic, but you'll get to see it before the end of this month. If you need help, maybe you are already a BA on the job, or you need help with resume review, interview preparation, or project support. You have a new project, you don't even know how to navigate and get started. You can also book time with faculty members, and they can help you navigate some of those. Okay, I would let anyone that has any question to ask quickly, if you have any. But quickly, we have, if you know, maybe you are interested, you are a practicing BA. So this is how you can get in touch with us here. We have our number to put it in the chat. But if you're a practicing BA and wondering, maybe you're trying to build your competence around change management, we have an upcoming webinar next week. There's a link in the chat where you can come learn more about change management. So it's another of our services we provide. Masha actually facilitates that. Okay, I'll go back to question and answers here. Anyone have any questions to ask?
Yes, there is Chichi's question in the chat. She says,
Okay.
how do I navigate not having any story from your experience in response to a behavioral-based question? I'll take that again. How do you navigate not having any story from your experience in response to a behavioral-based question?
I would say then talk about it in a hypothetical sense. So if they ask you a question, Emily, how have you handled this particular situation? Well, I would say, I haven't had that exact situation, but I have had another difficult situation which is similar. And then I would go and explain that other situation. If you are a new BA, not a lot of experience, but you're still applying for a BA job, I am sure that you have done some business analysis type activities without actually having been a BA. So you can look at, for example, look at the table of contents of the IIBA BABOK. Those are all the tasks that BAs do. So if you can think about, yes, I have done some problem analysis. Yes, I have engaged stakeholders. So let's say you are someone who worked in help desk, right? So you are application support. You have worked with stakeholders. you have worked on problem analysis. You have worked on elicitation and asking the user some questions. So I would say don't discount your past experience. See how your past experience aligns with the job and aligns with business analysis. And then it'll give you some material to talk about. So SWOT yourself again, know yourself, take an inventory of what you've done and how it relates to the job beyond just your resume.
Thank you, Emily. I think I missed one announcement. For our past students, we're starting some sort of like a post-training fellowship where we're touching base for specifically for those that are still searching, interviewing. We're planning something, so just look out in the group, in the WhatsApp group, for announcements coming up. People will be coming together, share their challenges. We'll have multiple sessions like that. So please look out for that session. Myself and Dio, and maybe if Emily is available, she might join, but I'm very sure of myself and Dio facilitating that.
I guess there aren't any other questions in the chat.
There is no question.
Well, I have enjoyed being here. I hope that the information I provided can be applied. Paula, I know that you are recording this session, so I will let you distribute the recording however you wish.
Thank you so much, Emily. We appreciate that. So for anyone following, I shared our YouTube link earlier. By Monday, you can check our YouTube page for a recording of this video, and you'll be able to access it and some other webinars we've had in the past as well. Thank you everyone for joining, and do enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bye.